Now we have my next guest, who is ZINOVY ZINIK. It's a perfect name. Now, ZINOVY, if you'd be kind enough to come up here. Do you want to sit?
Очень приятно.
Sit, are you happy?
It's okay.
Now, is that your real name?
It is, yeah. I mean, it is in the family, but my real name is Double Decker. I've got Glusberg ZINIK. So ZINOVY Glusberg ZINIK in my passport.
So,
But my daughter, who is quite a famous artist, so she's Margarita Glusberg, and I'm, as a writer, I'm ZINOVY ZINIK.
It's a great name for a writer. ZINOVY was actually born in Moscow to a Russian Jewish family, and then left lost. Is it lost or your Soviet citizenship? How do you?
It's been exchanged. They gave me one-way visa and took my passport. I thought that they wanted to check something, but they torn it apart and dropped it into a dustbin.
Gosh, so I've always wondered about that word "lost" because that's what it says
well, it was
officially.
off soon.
Right. So you left in 1975 and you went to Israel,
Yeah.
and then you got a job at the BBC, which I'm very pleased to hear about. Was that good news? Or?
It was good news. Yeah, I decided that I would never go uninvited to any country. So it's just I went to Israel because I invited there and to run a theatre, and then I've written a little novella which was declared by emigre circles as being anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic pornography, and I was immediately bought over by a big French publishing house called Ben Michel. So I came to France. And then the BBC heard about me and they invited. And then in 6 months I left the BBC, but was cooperating with the BBC ever since.
Which is nice because a number of my colleagues here, ex-colleagues from
Yes,
the BBC, which is great. And Rory McLean was at the BBC. Yes. I met my husband at the BBC. I was there 20 years. Goodness.
It's all BBC conspiracy.
It is, basically. Just a little bit more about you before I hand over for the reading. So you came to the BBC. So you were here in London, basically in the UK, from 1976. You're one of us, basically. You've been here a very, very long time, and you write in both languages, in English and in Russian, and publishes in both languages, which is quite extraordinary. Like Elif writes in 2 languages, and Vesna as well in 3, I think. George has been writing in English for most of your life, I think, and Oscar as well. You've written 14 books of fiction and non-fiction, and you'll talk a little bit more about it, but about immigration, religious converts, and political outcasts. And the most recent one, you've written autobiography called History Thieves, and the novel, which you're going to read from, I think, sounds familiar, or The Beast of Artek, an amazing title, and your latest novel in Russian. So that was so one's in English, sounds familiar as in English, and the one in Russian is The Orgon Box, which will be published this year. So, and you're a commentator for various magazines and for the BBC. Now you're going.
I'm amazed.
How do you do it exactly? I'm going to try not to ask anybody their age this time. So. I just assume you've packed an awful lot into your life.
I don't know. It's just I don't know. I mean, I'm very famous, completely unknown, as they say. You know? It's just unlike.
Well, we're very, very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
And
I'm glad to be here.
And thank you, because everybody's put a lot into preparing their pieces for us as well too. And I know that you're going to introduce us to. Your writing, but you're also going to read us a fable.
I'm going to read. No, this fable was referred to in sort of condensed form, used for this novel. Sounds familiar. And as you understand, I used a bit of my radio experience in this novel. It's there is a kind of dubious, manipulative businessman who plays on fears of a group of characters, Londoners, in Belsize Park, where I live. And they're sort of eccentric characters. One of them, they're actually quite real. They do exist. One of them is a taxidermist artist who earns her living as a gym trainer. There is a semi-employed handyman his girlfriend, barmaid, Turkish, Jewish, and there is two bodybuilders. Anyway, all these sort of about 4 or 5 characters, they all they had a trauma in their past, in their childhood. And these traumas, they are connected with a particular intense sound. And this sound is it is subject for these British manipulative businessmen. It plays on these traumas, on these fears, and convinces them they are part of a certain conspiracy. It's a kind of comic Gothic novel in which sound is like dense, intense sound could become flash and become sort of getting embodied as a kind of monster. The point is that all of them have their fears. Each of them had, as all of us, have our own kind of monsters, little or big ones. But he convinces everyone that this monster is one and single monster. And in it, I fear there is a danger of every collective obsession, which is basically what revolution is all about. And when people become sort of enticed to believe that there is a certain illusion of a monster that one should fight. To simplify, what I wanted to say is that, I don't know, for 42 years that I've been here, I saw how our liberal, myself, intellectual elite was applauding to different kinds of revolutions. I remember how the return of Ayatollah Khomeini from his exile in Paris to Iran was greeted with a great enthusiasm. Not in Iran, I'm talking about Western Europe and Britain. I remember how Mugabe actually came to power, and a number of girls went straight away from the BBC to help Mugabe to set up a free broadcasting system in former Rhodesia. And despite the fact that he publicly declared that he is a loyal follower of Leninism and Stalinism, somehow people disregard this as a kind of nonsense. And we know what's happened. I actually, to come to our daily life, I mean, it's just even Arab Spring, everyone was greeting this, sort of what was happening in Egypt, totally blind that behind these forces, there were a sort of rather horrifying Islamic clerics. I'm not talking about Islam, I'm talking about certain type of ideology. What I'm driving at is that we're living in a sort of post-Christian culture, but the cult of victimhood is still very strong. And there is a noble compassion towards underdogs. But when sort of certain mass collective monstrosity appears, and we wanted to fight it, and we wanted to fight it on the to liberate the underdog, we should always think about not just about underdogs, but who is going to be the next underdog. So I always, on behalf of underdog, because, I don't know, nowadays victim, as we have seen many times, easily becoming a new tyrant. And partly all these ideas are connected with my recent novel, sounds familiar. And the fable is basically about it. So, the maiden and the monster. Once upon a time, there lived a monster, a real beast, and no two ways about it. At regular intervals, God sent down to the capital of the world this monster to punish the inhabitants for their licentious ways. Every 100 years, the beast would appear in the city and devour the fairest maid of them all. The maid who was chosen by the elders to be the sacrifice for our time was known as the maiden, since she was the only virgin in a population of consenting adults that consisted entirely of fornicators. It was unwritten law that the beast devoured the maid on the 7th day after making its appearance, not a day earlier, not a day later. The maiden naturally wept bitterly and cursed the day she was born, the local population and the elders. The eldest of the elders tried to console the maiden and direct her thoughts towards the ways of truth. Just think, he said, according to the law, the beast may not touch you for a whole 7 days. In 7 days you can accomplish much. God finished the whole of creation in just 6 days. The maiden pondered these words. Then, collecting her thoughts, she made her way to the cave on the outskirts of the city, where the beast had its temporary abode and where it was licking its lips in anticipation of the 7th day. Entering the cave, the maiden placed a heavy chain around the beast's neck, took up a switch and drove it through the streets of the city. She lashed it with the switch, spat on it, called it the foulest names, and humiliated it in every possible manner under the gaze of all the inhabitants. And the beast was compelled to suffer all this since, according to the law, it had no right to touch the maiden until dusk of the 7th day. And so it continued 6 days. The days went by, and at the sight of this unprovoked cruelty, the inhabitants of the city felt more and more sympathy for the beast and less pity for the maiden, who had turned before their very eyes into a veritable monster. By the end of the 2nd day, they had all forgotten that on the 7th day, the maiden would be devoured by the beast. They talked nothing but of the moral depravity, the utter neglect of patriotic duty, and a complete absence of a sense of sacrifice in the younger generation. Every evening, a crowd of citizens gathered at the beast's cave in an effort to demonstrate that not everybody was a monster like the maiden. In their eyes, the beast had become the first martyr that century, and thanks to it, they had entered into the paths of repentance. Seeing the thousands bow down and praise it, the beast was so moved in spirit that it fell on its knees and begged maiden to hack it to pieces, so that the beast would live forever in the hearts of the people. But the maiden, who had witnessed the idolatry and cult of personality, was so filled with jealousy that she refused to slay the beast. "It is against the law," she cried. "According to the law, you must devour me alive. Then I will be a martyr, and I will live forever in the people's hearts." The beast was cut to the quick. "But that is unjust. You do not deserve martyrdom. I have suffered 7 whole days, while you have suffered not a little." They argued through the night. As dawn broke, there was nothing left for the beast to do but to take off its chain, slap the maiden across the face, and set out for home, never to appear in the city again. Time passed, and the inhabitants of the city drowned their guilt in wine and debauchery. But the maiden was inconsolable. From a lovely maiden, she was gradually transformed into an old maid. At night, the idea of sacrifice gave her no rest. The maiden was withering away visibly, so the eldest of the elders decided to make urgent inquiries as to the whereabouts of the beast. Rumor had it that God, furious at the beast for breaking the law and not devouring the maiden at the close of the 7th day, had sent it into exile to the back of beyond, where the inhabitants were noted for the monstrous sobriety of their conduct and their irreproachable appearance. The beast looked so outlandish in their presence that it was afraid to come out from behind the doors of its political asylum and spent its days skulking behind a high wall. The people in the neighborhood hurled rocks at the beast over the wall and paraded outside with banners that insulted its beastly dignity. When news of all this reached the ears of the maiden, she was filled with anger. She believed that the goodness and beauty are innate in each of us. She decided the beast was a victim of monstrous injustice, prejudice, which she must combat by personal example. The maiden journeyed to the back of beyond and knocked at the iron gates. Maiden had to remain outside the wall 40 days and nights. On the 41st night, the beast, who had come to trust the maiden, opened the iron gates. At first, she kept her distance from the beast. She kept her distance from the beast. Gradually, beast became accustomed to maiden's attention. One day, the beast even agreed to take a bath. And it was there that the maiden discovered the beast is crying. Possibly it was only droplets of water from the steam, but the maiden was certain there were tears. "Why are you crying?" she asked. "Oh," the beast replied, "how do I suffer?" The maiden's heart skipped a beat. "We are born to suffer," she told the beast. "Through suffering we come to the truth." The beast gazed at the maiden with its third eye and said, "But truth never reveals itself without love, and there is no one to love me." And the beast confessed a terrible secret. In its previous incarnation, the beast had been a handsome prince, but a wicked witch with anti-monarchist leanings had brought a monstrous revolution in him and turned him into a monster. And a monstrous beast he would remain until a fair maid should fall in love with him and release him from the evil spell with a kiss. The maiden's heart skipped 2 beats, because her faith in the goodness and beauty innate in each of us was thus confirmed. Casting away false modesty, the maiden threw her arms wide in embrace, summoned all her civic courage, and kissed the beast. When the maiden opened her eyes, she saw the beast exactly as it had been before, its monstrous appearance quite unaltered. It stepped out of the bath, took up a hand mirror from a shelf, and raised it to the maiden's eyes. And when the maiden looked into it, she saw a frog. Fairly soon, maiden had learned how to croak coherently, and the beast was once more crawling with lice. They lived happily ever after and died on one and the same day. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. The maiden gives you a kiss. That was wonderful.
Be careful, be careful.
That was fabulous. Thank you so much. Oh, I've left a bit of the red lipstick anyway. Thank you very, very much. That was ZINOVY ZINIK.